Welcome, dear colleagues. Welcome, Olena. The Selection Commission for selecting members of the High Qualification Commission of Judges of Ukraine continues the round of interviews with the candidates invited for the interview stage. And here we have our next candidate, Olena Yaniuk, judge working in the Commercial Court of Kyiv region. Olena, before we start our interview, let me share with you the protocol and the rules. So, at the beginning of the interview, you will have a chance to speak for up to 5 minutes in order to share the information about yourself and your motivation for participating in this selection process. Each member of the selection commission is going to ask you questions. The questions will start with the rapporteur on your candidacy. This is Ted Zajachny, who is the rapporteur, and we have a live broadcast of our interview, which fact you are well aware of. What is important? During the interview, we would ask you, and we will also try to do the same. So we would ask you to not mention some personal, sensitive information related to you or any third parties. Some surnames, phone numbers, addresses, contact data, so no sensitive or personal information should be mentioned. It's just our request for you to try and avoid that information, and we will also try to formulate our questions in general, but for all of us to understand what we are talking about. Suppose you have some sensitive information that you wouldn't like to share with the public during the interview, you may ask us either right now or in the course of interview to have this part closed. We will consider your request, and probably a part of the interview that is dedicated to some highly personal sensitive issue will not be broadcast. We will just having an internal discussion here among those present in the room. Suppose we do have an air alert, we will interrupt the interview and we will wait until it's over in the bomb shelter. And unfortunately, we are starting the second interview a little bit behind the schedule because we've got some electricity problems, electricity issues. So, unfortunately, from time to time, maybe we will be interrupted for technical reasons, or maybe not. That's all from me as far as the rules of procedure, the protocol is concerned. So, do you have any request for having a part of the interview closed for public broadcast? Well, there was the question for me regarding my colleague, and when I was providing the explanations, if you find those explanations not to be sufficient, and if you keep asking about that, I would ask to close that part of the interview. Otherwise, I don't have any other issues I would like to consider in the closed part. So, colleagues, I suggest that we grant this request, and suppose any selection commission member asks a question regarding this colleague of Olena, you will just warn us that the question will be about that, and we will close that part of the interview. No objection? Okay, thank you. Then the decision is passed. Then let's start. And let me give the floor to my colleague, Tad Zazachny. Tad, you're very much welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to you, Judge Yaniuk. I'm going to wait until you have the translation service. Um, I welcome you to the session of the Selection Commission this afternoon. I thank you very much for accepting our invitation to join us in the second stage of our selection process for the High Qualification Commission of Judges of Ukraine, and that is the interview. I encourage you to try and relax and not to be nervous. We are here to have you share with us and with the public through the broadcast some of your information, your background, and the qualifications that you have for a membership on the High Qualification Commission. Let me briefly introduce you. You were born in the city of Kiev in the early 1980s, and you began your work in the law some 19 years ago. And you have been working in the law 19 years, 14 years, and 6 months as a judge. You began your work, as I understand it from your record, at the Higher Arbitration Court of Ukraine in 2001. And since that time, you have had a number of positions, and I'll go through those very briefly. You were inspector for the High Arbitration Court of Ukraine. You then became a clerk with the the General Department in the High Economic Court of Ukraine in the city of Kiev. You began an approximate 5-year career then with the State Judicial Administration of Ukraine. And from the information we have investigated and received, you started as a leading specialist in the Department of Human Resources and Civil Service Administration. And in every year or so, you were promoted and you received a higher level of responsibility. About in the year of 2005 to 2008, you became the chief specialist of the Department of Judicial Personnel and supporting the Department of Appeals and local courts and the State Judicial Administration. Of particular interest to me, and I think to my colleagues, is your involvement in 2008 at the State Judicial Administration, involved with the High Qualification Commission of Judges of Ukraine in the Department of Judicial Affairs. And we were particularly interested in that because it relates to the work now being done by the High Qualification Commission. In 2008, 2009, you were appointed Chief of Staff of the Commercial Court of the city of Sevastopol, and then you were appointed a judge in 2009, and you served in the Zaporizhzhia District Administrative Court, subsequently in the Commercial Court of the city of Sevastopol, in the Economic Court of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, and we may have a question or two about that that we had previously addressed to you. And more recently, in 2017 until now, you have been a judge of the Commercial Court of the Kiev region in the city of Kiev. Lastly, we were also very interested, at least I was, and I think my colleagues as well, that since 2017 as a judge, you have been working with the National School of Judges of Ukraine in the city of Kiev as a lecturer, course developer, and of course you've taken some personal training as well through the National School. So with that background, Judge Yaniuk, I now invite you to tell us a little bit about yourself by way of introduction.
Thank you. Let me mention that it's really true that since 2017, I've been working as the judge of the Commercial Court of Kiev region. Before the annexation, I used to work in Sevastopol in the Crimea, and before that, I worked for more than a year in Zaporizhzhia Administrative Circuit Court. I'm a judge of the Commercial Court, and I consider bankruptcy cases. In 2019, the code on bankruptcy of Ukraine was enacted, and the new notion of bankruptcy of sole proprietors of individuals was introduced, and we have new procedures that can be used by people who are people of integrity. So I'm now checking the integrity. I'm checking people for their integrity. I wanted to add this because this is my additional experience. I also used to work as the chief of staff in the city of Sevastopol in the court there, and there I got the experience of being a manager of the team of staff. It was about 90 people, but well, still it's some experience. Also, while working in the state judicial administration, besides working with documents of stuff, I got the experience of dealing with different regulatory documents because we had to develop some instructions, briefings, provisions, regulations, and I also got some experience of arranging mass events. I mean, when we had to organize the procedure of oath taking for many people. Um, because a number of judges back then, when the state judicial administration was being established, hadn't taken the oath, so I had to organize this process. Since 2017, I've been working up till now with the National School of Judges, and I've got there the lecturing experience. I've developed some trainings, some workshops, some seminars, and I also participated in those trainings. I was the elaborator of those trainings. I was the mentor judge in some of the projects, and there was a period of time when judges had to write their written papers and had their internship, and I had to check their papers. Then I passed my qualification assessment, and there is the positive opinion of the previous composition of the HQCJ. What about my motivation? I think, well, I know that I am a purposeful, dedicated, and sociable person. I'm a person of principle, and this information can be confirmed by my colleagues and not only by them. I'm not afraid of changes, of experiments. I'm not afraid of decision making and being responsible for those decisions. My energy, willingness, and health, I wanted to say, but unfortunately today is a little bit irrelevant, as well as my experience, professional and personal experience, and my personal qualities and traits of character will enable me to be a good member of the HQCJ who will be able not just to overcome the basic challenges the HQCJ is now facing, but to improve the work of the Commission. Thank you.
Much, Judge Yaniuk. Um, the first question that I am interested in having a discussion with you about is your role and involvement, and you mentioned it, and I think very importantly, with the National School of Judges. That role and involvement essentially involved both the education of judges, judge candidates, but as well, to some extent, the evaluation of those candidates. And that very much, of course, is part of the work that the High Qualification Commission of Judges does. So you have a great deal of experience already with that kind of work. It has been suggested by some that um, there be a reconsideration of the role and involvement of the National School of Judges with respect to the education of judges. And I would be interested, with your experience with the National School, in hearing your opinion as to the importance of the National School of Judges, what you regard as any changes or improvements that can be made in the National School, and as well whether or not the current term of study, how long students must spend at the National School, is appropriate as a training for the real work of a judge. So I think I asked you three questions really as part of that, but hopefully you'll be able to help us with it.
Thank you very much for the questions. They are really interesting. Let me stress that the National School of Judges of Ukraine is raising the qualifications and having advanced training, not just only for judges, but for staff members, which is important because we know that court consists not only of judges but of the staff of the court. And I can tell it to you from my own experience and from what I see that we do need such an institute as the National School of Judges, and taking into account new um, things that are now happening, maybe you have to engage people in, let's say, electronic court, because the judges that are lecturers cannot probably be good experts in those functions. This should be done by the practitioners. They should teach them, but unfortunately we don't have that many experts, that many practitioners. And suppose we have a judge speaker or judge reporter, we would like to see a good expert who um, can really be the lecturer there. So I don't know whether the judicial experience can be taught, but I think that for some special skills like being a judge rapporteur and how to use electronic court and how to get clear about some psychological tricks. So for such special skills, we need to engage special experts in the field. Uh, they are the people who can teach you this. But take into account the possibilities the National School of Judges now has. Unfortunately, we don't have such people engaged in that. Uh, that would be a good change. Well, in some cases, we can see engagement of those practitioners. And it seems to me that recently, about 2 months ago, we had a very interesting seminar. Of course, they engaged donors. It was not only the National School of Judges, but this was highly informative. And I really got new skills. And the National School of Judges needs to engage experts. That's absolutely necessary. It cannot be just the judge in the court sharing some information that he got while having a training and some courses. There should be experts engaged in that. I understand that there is a financial component behind that, but there must be changes. Maybe I've not fully answered your question.
Answer, thank you. I want to turn to something a little bit concerning with respect to the information we have about you. Um, and I want to give you an opportunity to publicly address this, and that is your driving. Um, Beginning in 2012, you failed to maintain a safe speed, I am told, and lost control of your vehicle, and you had an accident, and the vehicle was overturned. Your explanation there was that the roads were icy, and as a result, you had this single vehicle accident. A little more of a concern, however, is you're driving at excessive speeds, and I will share with you the information that we have. On December 30th, 2023, you were driving on the highway in the Kiev Odessa region, and you exceeded the speed limit by 57 kilometers per hour. That was regarded as a serious infraction, and you received a significant penalty. You pled guilty to that offense and received a penalty of 1,700 hryvnias, approximately US $45. Um, the next year, on May 28th, 2024, you were driving in a lane designated for public transport. And again, you received a ticket and a fine for that. You pled guilty and the fine was paid. September 7th, 2024, again, you were on the highway in the Kiev district and you exceeded the speed limit by 32 kilometers an hour. Again, you pled guilty and you were given a fine. And then finally, September 24th, 22nd, which I might note is the same day that your application for this position on the High Qualification Commission was submitted. On that same day, you once again were caught speeding 42 kilometers an hour in excess of the speed limit. And again, you pled guilty and a fine was issued for you. Now, in the last year, therefore, you have committed 5 driving offenses. And I'm sorry, yes, 5 driving offenses, including December of 23. So in the last year, you have 5 driving offenses. And a member of the public may say to themselves, now, judges are employed to uphold the law. And here, Judge Yaniuk seems to disregard the law. She has had 5 driving offenses in the last year. What do you say in answer to the concerns that may exist about your respect for the law?
Well, I do respect the law, but situations may be different. I can explain that I'm always in a hurry. That's true. That's my drawback. That's my fault, and I'm trying to somehow counter it. But, well, it seems to me that this shows that, well, there is an opinion that if you're a judge and you are violating the rules, this means that you have got some agreements behind that and you will never pay any fines. But I plead guilty. Always pay all the fines, and well, the amount of fine was 860 hryvnias, not 700, because I paid it in time, so I could pay twice less. I respect the law, and after my last fine, after I saw that last fine, I started really taking some steps in order to control myself. When I am tired, I try not to drive the car now. And this is not within the city. And I can explain you that when there is a change in the speed mode, like when like you have the highway and then you start entering the inhabited settlements, so that is just the rapid one. So probably physically, I'm just not able to see the sign in time and to change it, to change the speed.
All right, thank you. I do want to make the point that speeding is a um, is controlled for the purpose and for the safety of the public. And I'm glad to hear that you've taken some steps to address your driving habits. Now, something else that I wish to take up with you deals with your application for an adjournment of this because there's some personal information that is involved. And so as a result, we will go offline briefly to deal with that situation.
Прохання перервати
Stephen, you will proceed.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are now back in session, and I'm going to turn the questioning over to my colleague, Judge Markman.
Judge Yaniuk, thank you very much for being here this afternoon. We appreciate your interest in the position and your participation today. Tell me again, please, about your work at the High Commercial Court, if you would, please. I was a little confused. You've had a lot of positions, and I just was not clear what you did at the High Commercial Court. Could you tell me, please?
As far as arbitration court is concerned, that was just the previous name. Then it became High Commercial Court because of the reform. So that's the same name. I worked at the Chancellery, worked with correspondence, which I had to register. I also recorded some court documents. Well, I was just after school back then. So, of course, nobody gave me great assignments. And after that, there was a reform of the High Arbitration Court into the High Commercial Court of Ukraine. And I was a kind of a secretary of the court sitting because there were panels of 3 judges and they gave me some amount of work which I had to perform. This was like preparing the documents for the court hearing, some work with chancellery, some technical issues. That's when I worked as the inspector in the High Arbitration or High Commercial Court.
Inspector of that court do? That seems like a pretty responsible position, inspecting anything.
Well, it is responsible because people working in the chancellery must be responsible to submit all the documents in time, to register all the documents in time, to prepare the materials in the case for the consideration. That's responsible.
There's some aspects of a clerkship to the court clerk responsibility, is there not?
Yes.
Just explain to me, please, how this came to be. My understanding is that you were a first-year student at the time. You were 18 years old. You may have been very precocious, but how did this happen at such an early age?
Well, it was right after school that I started my studies, but that was extramural studies. And at that time, the legislation allowed to hire people with no higher legal education, but being students of higher educational institutions.
But by whom at the court were you hired by? Do you recall?
HR department.
Let me go back to the driving issue, if I could, please. Were there any other occasions other than the 5 occasions I think that my colleague mentioned in which you were driving outside the speed limit, and not just 1 or 2 miles over, but in approximately the speed limits that you were caught by the police driving at?
Well, to tell the truth, I don't have to hide this. From time to time, I do have cases when the police catches me red-handed when I overspeed. That really happens. That could be the police patrols catching me, or that may be surveillance cameras, CCTV. So different situations.
Stopped on other occasions, but not given a ticket, is that correct?
Yes, yes. Well, it was yesterday. I'm already following the rules, but I was stopped by the police. I asked why, and they just said, "Thank you, goodbye, good luck." I didn't understand why they stopped me, but that was the situation I had yesterday. So when the police stops you, it's not always the case that they are going to give you a ticket. Maybe that is some inspection because we're living in tough times. So that's it.
Understand why you would say you're surprised they stopped you. You said you were driving in excess of the speed limit. Wouldn't it be pretty clear why they stopped you?
No, I was not over speeding yesterday. If we are speaking about the situation, yesterday I was just keeping to the rules and they stopped me. That's why I was surprised.
Are there other times that you were speeding that you either stopped by the police and not given a ticket, or you weren't stopped by the police at all?
No, they, if I overspeeded and they caught me, they always gave me the ticket.
Times that you were speeding when you were not stopped at all?
I don't know. I was not caught. I don't remember this. I cannot tell you whether I overspeeded or not.
Driving while you were tired. I think that was after these 5 driving. You stopped speeding when you were tired. But until 2024, you were driving when you were tired, right? So I assume there were other occasions in which you might have been speeding. Is that right? You didn't stop driving when you were tired until after those 5 episodes. Is that not correct?
Well, actually, yes. Because that's a really bad situation when every 2 weeks you're getting a fine, you're getting a ticket. So I understood that this is something wrong, and this is because of my being tired and being always in the hurry. And by tired, I mean when I cannot respond to the road situations, when I'm not attentive. I'm not trying to boast of the fact that I was not caught while overspeeding. The point is that now we have a lot of controlling devices. We have a lot of cameras on the roads. The limits are changed. So this is what I meant. I didn't mean that I was always overspeeding, but nobody caught me. I don't think so.
On any of the 5 episodes that my colleague Judge Zarzechny mentioned, did you ever call to the attention of the police that you were a judge?
Not a single time.
Recognize you as a judge?
No.
Would they recognize that you were a judge? Did they
No.
for a driver's license?
Yes, sure. Every time they ask me to show the driving license and the insurance. That's something that they do always.
Ukraine, so I don't know, I don't have a driver's license, but I've been told that driver's license for judges indicate that the driver is a judge. Is that incorrect?
No, it's not indicated. It's not indicated. The position is not indicated. I can tell you what information is there in the driving license, but definitely not the information about the position. So it's name, surname, patronymics, the category of vehicles you are allowed to drive, and your address. And that's it. No position. And the date may be indicated, but only in the new version of the driving license.
15, following one of your your overspeeding episodes where you admitted guilt, you sought to be given a more lenient sentence on the basis that you were an internally displaced person. You had come from Crimea, I believed. That was the basis for you requesting leniency. Given that at that time you were returning to Kyiv, your hometown, where you were born, where you lived a long time, where you had family, where you had property, is it proper to rely upon being an internally displaced person? My understanding of the internally displaced person basis for leniency is that such persons have either suffered from Russian aggression or occupation, or for some other reason been prejudiced or biased in some respect, is it proper for you, given your relationship with Kyiv, to be arguing that you are entitled to leniency on the basis of one of your driving episodes because you were an internally displaced person? Was that a mistake, or was that an appropriate exercise of that status?
Well, as far as this situation is concerned, let me briefly indicate that there was a traffic accident with the route bus. And in that traffic accident, there was no more victim, but for me, I mean, in financial terms. And it was my initiative to call the police. The police came, they arranged the protocol, and it was established that the carrier, the shipper, was actually in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea. That's why I couldn't have any inspection to establish the truth, because the owner of that company to which the bus belongs was staying in Crimea. So this traffic accident didn't cause any physical or financial injuries to the other party, and that became the grounds for my statement. I came to court. I pleaded guilty, and under the code of Ukraine for administrative offenses, this is the grounds for having lenient punishment. And as far as the IDP status is concerned, I didn't submit any certificate about my IDP status. That's what I can tell on this matter. So the ground for lenient punishment was not the fact that I was an IDP, because I didn't submit any certificate about the IDP status. I even didn't have this certificate, and I didn't get this status. I never submitted such documents to the court in the consideration of that matter. So the decision was just passed because the very traffic accident did not cause any financial or physical injuries. And uh, there were no statements or claims made by the passengers, by the company to which the bus belonged. There were no claim for compensation from me. That was the reason for that. That's what I can tell you on this issue.
You'd argue that you were entitled to IDP status?
Well, it wouldn't be ethical, first of all, and secondly, IDP, according to our current legislation, doesn't have the status doesn't give you the reasons for or the grounds for having any lenient response. I generally think, well, there are some statuses that could become the grounds for that, but they should be prescribed in the law. It's like concerning benefits and more lenient punishment.
If you were elevated to the High Qualifications Commission and someone came before that commission for consideration of something that was within your jurisdiction, what would your thinking be about such a candidate? What would your own thinking be about such a candidate who's had so many brushes with the law as yourself?
If I wonder if you could rephrase the question.
High Qualifications Commission and someone came there with a driving record of the sort that you have, what would your reaction be to that individual's application?
Well, I need to clarify what the situation should be, under what circumstances this happened, because we're all humans. It's human to err. There may be cases when this may be happening.
We should move on. We have little time left, sorry.
Okay. Judge Verlanov.
Thank you, Stephen.
Good afternoon, Olena, once again. In your motivation letter and now in your introductory speech, you mentioned that you intend to become a member of HQCJ since you believe that your professional and personal experience will allow you to cope with the challenges that the Commission is now faced with. Could you please enumerate those challenges? And are there any specific steps? Do you have any specific steps in mind? Well, everybody is aware of these challenges. So we are talking about the selection, the evaluation, and it's also about the dossiers. This is something that I know of. These are the main challenges that everybody is talking about. And right now, members of HQCJ are taking some steps to tackle these challenges. What would I do as a member of HQCJ? Number one, well, the question is that right now HQCJ already has some experience and we already see some results of their work. I can point to some positives and negatives here, but as far as the specifics is concerned, I need to have a closer look at what they are already doing. Maybe it has been implemented already. It's just that the public is not aware of it. So these are the things that everybody knows about to complete the selection processes, to review the criteria. So I have some ideas, but these are not things that could be implemented overnight. So what kind of ideas are you talking about? For example, with regards to Public Integrity Council. So how does it look like at the moment? So we have the Public Integrity Council, and how does it work? So a request is being sent, and then some information is provided, which is taken from open sources. I'm talking about mass media, different messengers, and my suggestion is as follows. I'm not sure how realistic that is, but it's to have maybe public integrity councils by specific territorial communities. This applies not just to judges, but also to prosecutors and other officials. So people live together within one community and they can see what car is driven by this person, what property they have. So people can see these things. And then if some information is requested, then it's going to be more realistic. So you are suggesting that we have public integrity councils by specific territorial communities. Well, it may be an unpopular decision. I'm not sure that my colleagues would support that, but what is the connection of this initiative to the activities of HQCJ? So let me explain. So people will see that a selection has been announced for a specific vacancy and a judge is applying for the vacancy, and then people can submit information about that person. They can submit information about the positives and negatives. Okay, that's clear. What else? Another thing that we could do is we can review some of the procedures that we currently have in place. For example, the cognitive tests. I'm not really sure if that's correct. Of course, we definitely need to have psychological tests to be able to assess the positive and negative characteristics. But as far as the cognitive test is concerned, I'm not really sure that's relevant because people coming to HQCJ, they are submitting their applications. They are already professionals in the sphere of law. They need to have at least 5 years of experience. It means that the person has already been employed for 5 years. And if their cognitive abilities are low, so am I understanding you correctly? We don't need the cognitive tests? I don't think we need them. All right. These are probably the main things that I wanted to tell you. There are some other minor measures. Also, in your autobiography, you mentioned that you have never participated in the work of judicial self government bodies. But we can see it from materials of your judicial dossier and the decisions of the Congress of Judges of the Commercial Court of Kyiv region, you were elected a delegate to the 16th Congress of Judges of Ukraine in December of 2018. So are you aware of this information, where you're really selected as a delegate? Maybe I just don't really understood that it's a judicial self-government body. So could you please explain your understanding of the participation of a judge in the work of judicial self-government bodies? Well, maybe this is just that I wasn't attentive enough. Yes, I was a delegate back in 2018. Yes, I'm sorry for that. So this is probably the second fault of yours. The first one being that you are constantly in a rush, and the second one is that you are inattentive. That's the cause and effect here. And in your opinion, do you have any other faults? Yes, of course. What are they? I can be too kind. I may be too emotional. Is it a fault? Being too kind is a fault, yes, because sometimes I have to be more harsh, more serious when making the decisions, and kindness can stand in the way. It all depends on the situation. All right. Thank you, Olena. And with this, I am giving the floor to my colleague, Robert.
Robert Broekhuis. um, Ms. Yaniuk, when I was reading your motivation letter, what I always do, I always look at the first question. The question is, what is your motivation? And your answer was, well, I have experience and I can be appointed. But that is not a motivation. Motivation is something that you want to have the job because you want to contribute something, and that you have views for the future, and that you want to bring something extra to the development of the judiciary. But nothing is there in your motivation letter. Is there a motivation for you to join, or is it only the nice job?
Yes, I do have motivation. The motivation is to improve the work of HQCJ. So HQCJ is the key instrument that actually helps us select judges. And if we talk about staff, then it results in professional judges, and professional judges translate to confidence in the judiciary. Yes, I have this huge motivation because I want to move forward. I want to contribute in a positive way. The thing is that I cannot maybe formulate this in 2 or 3 sentences, so I decided to be very precise in my answer because I'm more of a person of action, not a person who speaks a lot. So I decided not to mention some things so that you don't have some extra questions.
Very precise, because you didn't answer the question. The first question was, what is your motivation? But you have answered that now. But then if I go to question 8, then it is asked from you how you will contribute to increase the level of public trust. And then you say something about, I will take measures granted by law to improve the procedures for selecting candidates. Yeah, there I read something extremely generic, which is, again, not an answer to the question, because this is by solving and making better procedures. I hope you agree with me, you don't get better judges. You get better judges by selecting the correct and the good people, and to make sure that they develop into better judges for the future. So can you explain to me why you mention only procedures if we're talking about, I hope, that's the job of the HQCJ to select better judges? Is it your intention to select better judges or better people who become a judge?
Yes, so it's about better people who can become better judges. So a judge doesn't mean that they are a good person, of course. So in order to increase confidence in the judiciary, we not only need to select professional judges, It's also about providing services to the citizens. It's also about communication. So there are many other things, and if necessary, I can speak on each of those things.
We asked you the question in the motivation letter, so you could give your views that, but I will continue. And because then the next question is why the selection commission should have confidence in you. And the answer, confidence and trust that you will play a decisive role in strengthening the integrity, incorruptibility, and professional competence of the judiciary. And your answer, so what it says is, please explain how you will contribute to make everything better. Your answer is the same as the first question, and that is that you say, well, I am a person of integrity, and I believe that you want to say, and that shows that I can play a decisive role. But that's not an answer to the question. What you have explained, I would like you to explain to me is why we should select you. What do you bring to the table, you, that makes you suitable for this commission? And that's not enough to be a person of integrity. There needs to be some kind of a motivation. You're not going to reach it only by changing, of having better procedures. You have to bring something extra. So please tell me what that is.
Well, I have the experience. I have some personal qualities. I have vision of where HQCJ should move in the future, what things should be done, what measures should be implemented. I'm talking about improvement of training, both for judges and staff members. So I have ideas on how everything could be done. But as far as specific steps are concerned, then some of them would include review of some regulations. I know that HQCJ is now involved in the process. They are publishing some provisions and regulations, and I even have some remarks with regards to the documents that have been published. So these are specific steps. Again, I'm not talking about something that's not realistic. I see what the situation is. I have vision for how it could be improved. I know that I have the capacity to do it and I can do it. I can convey this information to my colleagues that are part of the collegial body. And if they support my proposals, then I think these improvements will be implemented.
Issues I believe in the judiciary in Ukraine is integrity. I've been trying to find the word integrity in the letter, but I have not been able to find, let's say, any idea on your side how to enhance integrity in the judiciary. And again, the only thing you say is that you will try to do this by enhancing procedures. How are you going to enhance the integrity of the judiciary in Ukraine when you are a member of this commission?
Maybe I'm just repeating myself and I'm repeating all the other candidates for the position of an HQCJ member. But these are necessary interviews, review of questions, criteria. When talking to a person, a lot can be revealed about their strengths and weaknesses, their demeanor, the way they're answering the questions, psychological tests. This is also information about the strengths and weaknesses of a person. So it's about the selection procedures, but we are also talking about enhanced qualification. And this is another big chunk of work done by HQCJ, again, reviewing and improving all of these directions of work. And at the beginning of the interview, I already mentioned some of the improvements that I could implement.
Jefje? Sorry? I'm not on time? Yeah.
I forgot that I needed to switch on the mic. Excuse me. My last name is Myazintsev, dear Olena, and let's continue your interview. You may have noticed that we are using motivation letters and reference letters as a way for us to get to know our candidates better. Since we don't know you, otherwise there would be self-recusals. That's why your motivation letter and reference letters provided by other people give us an opportunity to at least get to know you a little bit. I wanted to ask you the following question. In your reference letters, regardless of the fact that they were provided by different people, we can see a uniform vision of who you are as a person. And these reference letters are very similar. They start practically with one and the same phrase. So my question is, did you help those people draft those reference letters for you? No. No, I just asked these people to provide a reference letter for me. That's it. And you received 3 very similar reference letters. So perhaps everybody sees you in the following way. I don't have any templates, luckily or unfortunately. Between 2011 and 2017, if I'm not mistaken, you were a judge first of the commercial court of the city of Sevastopol and then the commercial court in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea. So when you left the annexed Crimea, did you ever go back? I left Crimea on the 1st of April of 2014. April the 1st, 2014. And then I came back in the summer of 2014 to pick up my belongings, and that was the last time that I traveled to Crimea. Did you have any contacts or maybe problems with the so-called law enforcement bodies that were installed there after April of 2014? Did you mean ours or the occupation forces? No, no contacts with the occupation forces, but somehow you were crossing the border, you said, in summer of 2014. At that time, there was no regime installed there. There was no customs, no border. So there was still enough time for people to leave. And I have a question that is up for debate, maybe, but I'd like to hear your opinion. So if you're faced with a moral dilemma, for example, let's assume you are already an HQCJ member and you are trying to do the vetting process of a judge for his professional competence and integrity. And this is a judge who is probably not having enough integrity and is not professional enough. But at the same time, he is working in a court that is close to the area where active hostilities are taking place. And if you recognize this person as somebody who lacks integrity, or if he doesn't complete the qualification evaluation, it would mean that the court will not have a judge for a very long time. Will this factor influence your decision-making process, yes or no? No, it will have no influence. I would disregard this fact. Because in Ukraine, unfortunately, we have many courts that have no judges, we don't have enough judges, and there is no solution on what to do. All right, so you, as a person who has been cooperating with the National School of Judges for a long time, and you mentioned this in the motivation letter that you had specific ideas about enhancement of qualifications of judges. So, don't you think that enhancement of judicial qualifications is not the main job of HQCJ? This is something that the National School of Judges should take care of. What is your opinion? Yes, I agree with you, but the thing is that the results of work of National School of Judges are checked by HQCJ. Without the National School of Judges, the tests and the practical assignments are not developed, and we are talking about training, about internships. So everything happens via the National School of Judges, and the requests are sent to the National School of Judges by HQCJ. So we are talking about the specific tasks, the format, etc., etc. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for your answers, Mr. Chair. I'm giving the floor to you. Thank you. Olena? So let's continue our discussion of the National School of Judges. That's a very interesting item. The European Commission prepared a report in 2024 about our progress on the way to reaching the EU and what Ukraine should do to improve this progress. And there is a section dedicated to the National School of Judges, and it's quite critical, frankly speaking. And if you speak English, I'm going to read it in English and then translate.
Of the NSJ should be implemented to strengthen the NSJ managerial and operational capacities. Кажуть, що треба інституційна реформа Національної школи суддів. Якщо перекласти
So if we translate this from the diplomatic language to at least legal language, it means that we need a new National School of Judges. So what is your attitude? What is your opinion about this idea expressed by the European Commission? So let me tell you that the war and the pandemic moved us all to online format, and in some cases the situation has become even worse because as far as the quality of knowledge gained in the offline format, I think it's much better. I just wonder what was evaluated by the Commission to be able to arrive at such a conclusion. And unfortunately, I'm not aware of these things, so I cannot really comment. So they are conducting interviews. Interviews with judges? No, they are interviewing different people: judges, prosecutors, lawyers, officials, MPs, ministers. So they are having these interviews to have this general idea, and then they prepare a recommendation. So unfortunately, as of today, the recommendation is like this. Are they wrong? I cannot tell you whether they are wrong or not, but the thing is that the National School of Judges is an institution that works with judges, and I think that the opinion of lawyers or prosecutors with regards to the activities of the National School of Judges is not that relevant because they do not come in close contact with the National School of Judges. The prosecutors don't even want to be involved in any joint initiatives with the National School of Judges. And as far as the lawyers are concerned, I'm not really sure how ethical that is, whether lawyers can tell something to judges, how documents should be drawn up, or I'm not sure they can comment on legal practice. I know that there are cases where lawyers are involved in the work of the National School of Judges, but it has nothing to do with the procedure and substantive law. So it's more about filling out of some declarations, for example. If you are so actively involved in the work of the National School of Judges, could you please tell us? So, at the National School of Judges, is there a way for you to check whether the students have gained knowledge? So, we have this initial testing first during the first lecture class, and then in the process, we do tests to check the knowledge. So you have the lectures first and then you do the tests, right? And after a year or two or maybe 3 years have passed. What do you mean? Do we test the knowledge then? So how does it look like from there on? So how can we make a judgment whether the course was effective or not? So I mean that in some schools of judges in the world, there is this model that is similar to big Western universities, similar to Harvard, for example. Their students sign up for courses themselves. They pick the lecturers themselves. For example, one lecturer may have a full house and the other lecturer may not have enough students. And maybe in some time, the course is no longer delivered at the university because the students don't sign up for it. And in some schools of judges in other countries of the world, there is this similar model. So they are assessing the courses, how interesting the courses are, the number of courses delivered by a specific teacher. So that's what I'm driving at. So do you have any similar instruments? We have surveys. We do surveys. And there are also some requests. Well, so I'm speaking for the National School of Judges here. Yes, we send requests to courts to understand what type of training courses we need to prepare. And then we summarize this information, and I'm currently working in commercial jurisdiction, and we are developing a curriculum, we are developing topics, and then training courses will be developed based on those topics. Thank you. So according to some approximate estimations, our judiciary lacks some 2,000 judges, give or take. On the one hand, and the context of questions asked today may contribute to that, it may appear that there is a huge line of people who want to become judges. But in my opinion, it's not like that. We don't have that many people who would like to become judges. For us to be able to fill in those 2,000 vacancies, we need to have at least twice as many candidates, or at least 3 times as many. So we need to convince some 6,000 candidates to participate in selections. And that's a lot. How would you convince a potential candidate? So let's make the task more difficult for you. And let's assume that your candidate is a legal advisor from a top 20 law firm in Kyiv. So he works in courts, he has a good salary, good working conditions. So everything is fine for him. So he could become a good judge. And you know that for sure, but this person doesn't really want to become a judge and participate in the selection procedures. So how would you convince a person like that? The first thing that comes to mind, especially under current circumstances, is to tell him that he needs to do something for his country. Because, the position of a judge is not that attractive. So if you are a specialist, a good professional in this or that sphere, then you will not want to become a judge. Maybe if this person wants to join the judiciary and then they have some plans for the future to maybe participate in bodies of judicial self-government, maybe that would be the only case. But with how the situation looks like at the moment, being a judge is very stressful. It's psychological pressure, control, not just with regards to the judge, but their close relatives. Also, we have issues with the staff of the court. We are underfunded. We don't have enough assistant judges and court clerks. So, regardless of how wonderful a person is, if they don't have proper motivated assistants, a judge like that will not be able to prove how professional they are. I agree with you, but what should be done? So we are in a situation when we, for some reason, take it for granted that we have so many wonderful candidates. And the only thing that should be done is to have the HQCJ that will have those people to pick from, who is better or worse. Yes, this is what the HQCJ is doing, but don't you think that the state overall and the judiciary as part of the state somehow will not be able to create this line of people willing to become judges? But we need to raise awareness. How should we do that? How do we convince people with integrity who have professional qualities necessary? Okay, so let me finish with my question first. I'm monitoring these processes in Western countries, and they have this turnover in this system. It's normal if a person is first a lawyer, then they become a prosecutor, and then they end up being a judge. So this is how it functions for them. It's a normal course of events. But now in Ukraine, we have selections and lawyers can apply. We are just starting. But we cannot say that the profession is that appealing or that the state is trying to create better conditions, or maybe you disagree with me. So the state has not created better conditions. So what would you change then? Well, on the legislative level, we should introduce some amendments. It should be about proper funding, I think. No, there will be no funding. Let's forget about funding. Oh, if we are talking just about enthusiasm, it's similar to doctors. When you are an intern and then you become a doctor, before becoming a doctor, you need to complete some training. So maybe there should be internship for judges, for people who want to become judges, and for a year, for example, they need to work within a court. And then alongside a judge, there will be a professional working and helping them. Constantly speaking of some promises, we are all human beings. Oh, why do you get a degree? You get a degree to get a profession. Why do you get a profession? To get a job, then to make money. But if you make 6,000 hryvnias as a court clerk, let's say 8,000, if you're lucky, then what kind of professional would agree to work for such a salary? And that's okay. If the situation is the way it is, and we have proper funding of the court staff and the judges, and there are proper working conditions, then there will be quality justice, there will be confidence in the judiciary. Everything will change. There should be better funding again for the staff, for the judges, for the equipment, for, let's say, some sofas. You need to create comfortable conditions when a person shows up to court. I don't think that without this, we will be able to solve the problem. To be able to find a solution, you need to understand the core, the root of all evil. So I'm trying to get to the core first, and I think that's the main reason. I didn't have a court clerk for a whole year, and I couldn't even find an assistant. And regardless of how qualified I am, I need to do my work. But because of us being understaffed and because of lack of professional people, the quality of justice administered is getting lower, and so is the confidence in the judiciary. Thank you. Dear colleagues, do we have any questions for Olena? I think that we can slowly move to concluding remarks. So, Olena, you will now have the opportunity to summarize today's interview. If you want to, you may draw our attention to specific ideas. Perhaps there is something that you haven't mentioned yet. So, you have 5 minutes to conclude. Thank you very much. I want to thank the Commission and the organizers for giving me the opportunity to go through this interview, to voice my ideas and opinions about the improvement of the judiciary. I do have motivation, believe me. Maybe I was unable to formulate it within 2 sentences, but again, I'm a person who is more about action. I cannot promise something that I will not be able to deliver on. So at the very beginning of the interview, I told you I don't want to give you some extra information because then you're going to ask me additional questions. Hopefully, I will be able to implement my ideas and become an example for future generations. What I mean by that is that the next composition of HQCJ will be able to say that I was the author of a specific idea. Thank you. Thank you for this interview. And we